done stepped in the game? At point blank range, who done stepped in the game? At point blank range, who done stepped in the game? Stepped in the game, stepped in the game.
Try Good afternoon. Good afternoon. How everybody doing? Welcome to the ShadowCast. We don't step in the game. I am your host, Shadow Fox Infinite, Shadow Fox Arcade. If y'all the Twitter people, it's been a while, so we got a little ShadowCast going. I got my round of guests here from the Winging It podcast. I got Action Jack. How you doing?
I'm good, man. I think this might be my first ShadowCast. So
wow.
Yeah,
man.
I don't think I've ever been on ShadowCast before. So yeah, glad to be
Good
here.
To have you on. I think the one you were on was probably the unofficial one. I don't know if you came on or not. I think you came on for a split second. Was it the Wii U one? I think you might have been.
Then I definitely wouldn't have been me. Yeah.
Okay. So then it was Andre. Then I'm sorry. Sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to misplace you. But we also got Sandstorm from the Sandstorm Show. How you doing, sir?
That microphone. Kicking you.
He is muted.
Am I good now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. It by default went to my headphones, not the actual mic, but I'm good. Y'all got me in like deacon attire, and I haven't switched out because I got to go right back, turn around and go right back in. But I'm doing good, man. Just good to be here, right back on the ShadowCast.
Outstanding. Yeah, so I wasn't able to make the Stormcast. I wanted to be there when you guys talked about this the first time. So I don't want to retread too much stuff, but and pretty much I would say the majority of people here today were probably might have more than likely were there last night. So so Nintendo got a new system, man. How y'all feeling about that?
I'm loving it, man. Like, I mean, I wasn't on the crowd that was like, oh, it's high time for Switch to give us a new console because this game isn't running well. I was just, I'm always just excited for Nintendo to drop a new console in general because they're always going to approach it from a different way other than Sony and Microsoft. So always happy to see Nintendo new hardware.
Okay. All right, good stuff. Man, when I first saw the leaks and whatnot, I was skeptical, definitely of that one guy that kept showing it from the side for some reason, like he was avoiding showing the screen. I don't know what that was all about, and I wasn't too sold on the giant plus buttons being on the inside of where the Joy-Cons go. But it definitely makes sense now, given that there's other standoffs for the new Joy-Con grips that you use as basically to turn it into a mouse. Mm-hmm. So that kind of makes sense. But pretty much all of the leaks, for the most part, with the exception of a couple of them, they ended up being true. Like for the first time in a long time, a lot of the leaks were true. I guess Mochizuki, he's still gonna be permanently banned as far as leaks go, because none of his stuff ever turned out. So no exo screens, no giant SSDs, none of that is taking place here. I mean, the one thing that might be true, there will be 64 gigabyte cards. That's about it. But I'm like, he's been screaming that since 2017, right? So, and at the time it was just too cost prohibitive. So. But yeah, we can. I'll tell you what. We'll go ahead and go through the entire thing here. But the first thing I wanted to do is I wanted to apologize to the audience because as a gamer, sometimes we get a little carried away. And I will tell you this one character in Unicorn Overlord, her side quests are off the chain. So I was all tied up in that. So I'll tell you, that's exactly what it was. I'm like, I should be probably doing a podcast right now. And I'm like, I need to see this through. So, so if you haven't played Unicorn Overlord, please go play that on whatever platform you prefer. Obviously, If you're here, you more than likely, since Grok defined me as a staunch Nintendo advocate, you want to be part of the Nintendo club. You want to play it on the Nintendo platform. So, which is what I did. I mean, if it didn't come out on Nintendo, then I would have played it on the Steam Deck or something. I don't know.
Right.
But you know how that goes. So the first thing I want to do, I'm gonna go ahead and share this little window here, and we'll get to it. But like first and foremost, Nintendo's not playing around. They make it a point. They're like, get a look at the successor to the Nintendo Switch system.
There you go.
So, and there are bits and pieces of that for Switch, like coming from Wii U. That's the next generation or the successor to Wii U. NX is the successor to Wii U. Like there were like tweets that mentioned that, but it weren't like a whole bunch of different things. So if there was any confusion,
Shadow.
Yes.
Jay said he's backstage.
Oh, okay. I don't see it. Oh, okay. So, yeah, this is different. So they made a lot of changes, and I couldn't see. All right, there we go.
He was gonna be chilling in the backstage the whole time.
Yeah. What's going on, Jay? Man, how you doing, man?
I am not Snoop Dogg.
It's an official Winging It podcast now, so I guess I need to parental advisory. There will be things. I don't think I've cursed yet, so it will. So far, so good. We say, but yeah, Nintendo kind of stumped it in. They said, "Hey, successor, like this is what we're doing right now." So it's a successor to the Nintendo Switch. It's the Switch 2, so we don't have an Adam Sessler moment.
You know they're still gonna have that. I don't know why you tripping. You know they're still gonna have that.
It's already happened. We already had people like pretending to be confused. We had people saying, and then you have the opposite. You're like, "Whoa, Switch 2 is 2. Like it's why don't they do something different?" And I'm like,
didn't they complain about that with the Wii U?
They were just complaining about that, or they were complaining this was going to be called the Super Switch X Plus 2DS.
Personally, I wanted my Capcom naming convention, the Super Nintendo Switch Championship Turbo Edition. But
I'm all about it. I was going to get attention.
I was all about. I would have been totally fine with Nintendo when they released Switch if they actually named it the Nintendo Entertainment System again. I would have been totally fine with that, and then call it NES 2. I'm like, okay, this is what we're doing.
That would have been hilarious.
Because even with that, even if somebody said that, oh, that would have been confusion. Think about Xbox for a minute. Like the first Xbox, you're already thinking of like, oh, this is the first Xbox, and then they went back and said Xbox One. It's like Xbox One, or are you talking about the original? Like,
right?
But people understood it, didn't they? They got it.
It's one because it's all in one.
It's just so strange to me how people pick and choose. You know, when it comes to stuff like that, and there was a guy that was. I mean, Twitter's full of these kind of arguments, but you'll hear them elsewhere too. And they're like, well, I'm confusing. Like you hear like other YouTubers, streamers, and stuff they're kind of like trying to massage it in slowly. And I'm like, no, that wasn't a thing. Don't pretend it was a thing. And they're like, well, my cousin's best friend so and so didn't know what the Wii U was, and I'm like, they weren't gonna buy a Wii U anyway, and they only bought a Wii because everybody else is buying one.
Right.
I mean, let's keep it a buck. Like,
yep.
I don't know why they do this. So, I guess that's Nintendo Switch. I was trying to see the actual page. So it's actually called Nintendo Switch Successor. That's the name of the actual page, but for whatever reason, it's not popping up here. I guess I have to go back to the home screen again. But I was trying to go through without it being weird.
Yeah. But yeah, man, I mean, this has been a interesting week in itself. I think this is the most I've tweeted and in quite some time, whether it was from the level of excitement, but then also to kind of diffuse and ask those questions of what are you talking about? Because it was just so many, like you could see those narratives build. Because like granted, in the Wii U era, I wasn't really on any forums or anything like that for me to really see it all play out. But seeing this of well, the 2 is confusing. It's not confusing when you see like a Moana 2 or a Lion King 2. Like, it's a sequel to whatever was the actual original content. The same thing when we talked about PlayStation. Same thing I said to a couple of other accounts. I was like, well, the main narrative always goes towards the parents. It's like, oh, the parents won't parent this. I was like, y'all have to stop making parents sound stupid. Like, they're not dumb. And then not to mention, that's what a worker is there for. If I'm working at GameStop, if I'm working in the electronics section of Walmart, whatever, my job is to explain stuff to you. If not, then I can at least read the cue card that's up under the product itself to give you some type of explanation. But in all honesty, you can really start seeing the narratives try to build up of, oh, well, nothing changed. We haven't seen it. other than them just showing you the hardware. Let them show you everything first before you make that comment.
It's funny you say that because we be like constantly be making parents sound like the 90s, like our parents.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Like, we're the new parents. Like
right.
we are the gamers. Like,
we are the parents. What do you mean? what are you talking about here?
That's so wild to me. And I guess my biggest thing is if you're going to say that and you're going to say that they were confused, what happened when everybody went out and bought the Xbox 360? All these parents went out and I'm going to get the Xbox, the 360 one. Like, that had to be confusing. And then later on, people weren't buying the Xbox 360. They were buying the Xbox 360 arcade because it came with the Kinect built in and whatnot. And it just didn't have the hard drive or whatever. It had like flash storage or whatever. But that was the one that had the Kinect. I need the Xbox 360 with the Kinect. Like, you know how much you have to put together to make that statement. And yet people were out there buying them in droves. And then what happens? You see them trending because stuff like that. So you will learn whatever you need to learn to do Dance Central like everybody else is doing on Twitter then at the time. Or do it for the Vine, if you will, because that's I'm dating myself here, but that's what was happening then at the time. So I'm like, so if all that happened, if all the different models of the DS and 3DS happened and they were totally fine, so you mean just adding a U at the end of a name? The most popular platform that Nintendo has made, by the way. That's what caused confusion.
Well, the other thing too is we live in an information age. If you know what Kim Kardashian had for breakfast, they ain't no excuse for you not to look up whatever you want to know. And that excuse of, oh man, it's just confusing for parents, like then they need to read.
Or as a parent that also has a parent that is in that bunch that they don't keep up with anything, right? She comes to me and she asks, what do the boys want for Christmas? What do they want for their birthday? And even if she doesn't want to ask me for whatever reason, and she goes directly to them, guess what they do? They pull out an iPad or they pull out an iPhone and say, this right here. Okay, hit the share button to send it to me so that way I can just purchase exactly what it is you just sent to me. We are no longer in that situation where you have to walk into a brick and mortar store and that's the only place you can make this purchase.
Right. Even considering brick and mortar, I don't want to deep dive here, but we could just go into the archives of Toys R Us and Babbage's and all those different catalogs. And hey, Christmas catalog, and see what they called Wii U.
Yeah,
because they definitely called it a system. It was a bundle usually during Christmas time, and it came with the game. You knew specifically that it was a game console. Yeah. And so how were the people that don't really follow gaming like that are going to go buy this in the store not know that it's a game console?
Yeah. Like I said, the only time I've seen that backfire, and this was me actually being in a store, a GameStop at that, they had the Wii U in a little corner, just like tucked off in the back, and these parents came in genuinely asking about it, and the retailer turned them away from it and pointed them towards the PlayStation and the Xbox.
I've literally seen it. I've seen it.
Yeah, I've seen it too.
I've seen it as an employee for one of those said establishments. I've literally seen it. And I'm like, hey, you're the store manager. Don't you want to sell these things?
Wasn't that like a standing order though? Like they was having like, because the sad thing about the GameStop situation was, and if you think I'm lying, just remember, all you had to do was go in there. You'd be one whole wall PlayStation, one whole wall Xbox. One tiny little corner.
Even the 3DS middle thing was bigger than that corner.
usually in the back, away from everything else, and around where the apparel was. So it'll be sitting right there. And if anybody would ask, they would be like, "Oh, you don't want to play that. You want to play this, and this." And they're like, nah, I want that. No, you want to get, but don't you want this? No, I want that. Like, and it got one time I was in a GameStop. Parent got so frustrated, left and went across the street to Best Buy. Yeah, that's how frustrated they got. So I was like, was they doing standing orders to like don't sell it? Because like that made no sense to me. And I've seen that happen twice.
I'll say this. So in 2011, right? That's when Skyrim and Skyward Sword came out the same year, right? And there was also Call of Duty and stuff like that too, right? I went into a GameStop Skyward Sword was literally in the back of the store in the corner. And it's a new release. This is a new release. There was one box of it. There was a Call of Duty for Wii or whatever. It was like all the way in the corner. You couldn't find it. I'm like, this is one of the best-selling game platforms of all time. And for whatever reason, you have a PS3 wall that is half of the store.
Yeah.
And I get it. Like, one of the things they will say as a retailer, their excuse would be, well, Nintendo should be sending reps out to these stores to come claim retail space and all this other kind of stuff or whatever. And I'm like,
nobody else is doing
Sony does that?
But there's no Sony and Xbox reps come. They're not going to every store enforcing that.
No, they're not doing that.
Which is crazy because when I used to work at Best Buy for just a little bit, and even when I've taken my trips to GameStop, Nintendo's the only one that's ever done that. To where like they've sent the rep out to set up like the kiosk. And they're just kind of testing it. But at the same time, when I went to the one in Target, she was still setting up. And I was like, oh, shoot, I wanted to try out the OLED. She was like, oh, I got one right here. And she was like, you can play it while I'm setting this up. I've never seen Sony and Microsoft do that with any kiosk.
I've seen Microsoft do it once when I was working at Target. Okay. When I was working at Target, I've never seen Sony do this, by the way. I'm not saying they haven't. Right. I've never seen it. I've seen the Xbox. I've seen the Xbox do it once. I was working at Target in Tallahassee. And we had a kiosk for them for it was right around the time the 360 dropped, and they came out to showcase that, and they came out to showcase Halo. They were showcasing something for Halo. Was it Halo 3? It was something for Halo. They were doing. They were trying to showcase. They were trying to showcase Halo. So they had an event. And they were in there. They set up the kiosk and all that to show off 360, and then they had the separate thing for Halo. That's the only time I've ever seen that. But yeah, I've never seen Sony do it. I've seen Nintendo do it, and I've seen Microsoft do it. But they don't do it. I've never seen them do it often. Nintendo actually promote that they're going around to different cities. Now they ain't gonna come to your city, but they'll go to New York. They'll go to Miami, they'll go to Toronto, they'll go to LA, but they're not coming to Detroit. They're not coming to.
They definitely ain't coming to the D.
No, they're not coming.
They're not going to Houston. They're not going to Lexington, Kentucky. But they'll go to New York, and they'll go to Toronto, or they'll go to LA. Might go to San Diego, depending. Yeah. But it just depends. But yeah, they come to your city though. No,
this is kind of a crazy tangent, but I like the way it's going. So that that's how we do these ShadowCasts anyway. But let's say that illegal, and as far as I know, anything in retail pretty much goes, with the exception of taking somebody's intellectual property.
Yeah. Right. It's the Wild West, dude. It's the Wild West.
Yes, and you pay to play anyway. So if you want retail space, you kind of work out a deal to see how many copies you're going to have, and they project based on how many copies you're sending them, how much retail space you're going to have, how much in cap space you're going to have, or whatever, and they rotate whatever. It's based on the logistics management for that district or whatever. So whoever the district manager is for that area, they'll work a deal with whatever rep or whoever is coming to buy bring product, and they'll work a deal to figure out how much product they're buying and where it's going to go on the shelf and whatnot. Yeah. But if nobody shows up, it's really up to the discretion of the management at that point and what they want to sell and what they want to push.
And to be fair, a lot of GameStop stores are very small. And I think it's like that on purpose, to be honest. It's not a lot. If y'all been into a GameStops, there's a lot of GameStops that you're like, how is this a store? Like, that's how small it is.
Like, even the one in the mall that I have here is really weird. Like, it's almost just a walkway. And what makes it weird is because when you walk into the store, you kind of have all like the pop figures, you have like all the gift cards and everything else. Then you have to like walk straight past the counter, which then is so close. People that are in line, you don't know are in line. So they could just be turning around looking at Pokemon stuff, but you're just trying to get to the other side to get to Sony, Nintendo, Xbox because it's so small. But then just the one in the plaza is huge. Like they still host tournaments and all the other good stuff when they have the time. And they're the ones that do the midnight releases. Like the one in the mall wouldn't even dare. But the one that's out in the plaza, they're big enough. But even then, those are just very slim. Those are a dime a dozen at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I've literally heard the fanboying in real time. I put this in the post on Twitter, but I've literally heard people turn people away legitimately ask, "Hey, my son says he want this Wii U thing," and they're like, "Oh, well, he doesn't need that. It's just it's like an add-on to the Wii, or it's just like a tablet. You don't really. Does your son like Grand Theft Auto? Like that? Those kind of conversations really happen, and that's crazy because if that happened out in the open at a well-known retail establishment, and I've seen it happen more than one retailer, I'm not going to say it was widespread, but a lot of stuff was happening behind the scenes, not necessarily behind the scenes and not necessarily sinister, but it's basically people's preferences became power at one point until Nintendo said, I don't need none of y'all. So it just became a thing at that point where they're just like, look, we're just going to force demand. We're not going to trust retailers. That was the whole point of E3. The whole point of E3 was they were pitching to retailers to say, hey, look, this thing is going to sell really well. Don't you want to have it in your store? That's what it used to be, right? And then Gaming Press started going there to provide whatever, because they used to be semi-private or whatever. So they provide their perspective on what's happening at E3 and whatnot. Well, at some point that got poisoned because there's clear bias, right? So you're going to be biased about what you want to present and how you want to present it to people, whether it's true or not. Or sometimes it is true, but you paint it in a negative light. So, you'll say one thing, you'll say, hey, well, this system doesn't require a TV. Who wants to play a game like off the TV? Like you want a console, you want to sit in front of your TV and have a big screen. They would literally say these things. And then later on, when something like Switch forces the issue, now they're a big fan of it and wonder why it changed their life so much. I'm like, you had to have step with Wii U already. Yeah, and I clearly saw that's what Wii U was when I first saw it. I'm like, yeah, that's why I want that.
Hey,
the main reason I used it for Switch, like, I mean, come on, like,
the name that comes to mind. The name that comes to mind, Brian Altano.
You know, it's funny.
Because he's the main one that did that. When we were talking to him on Twitter, he's the main one that did that. I was like, bro, I'm like, you straight up lying to two people that was on IGN all the time, looking at what you were saying. Okay.
It's funny that y'all talking about this, because I've had two different instances, and both of them are kind of similar. One of them had like the G4 moment, but like it's cool because I'm glad this guy is actually the store manager to our GameStop now. Like I really talked to him, but I remember going in there and somebody planned. So like obviously our Wii U section was small, and so the lady was asking the questions about the Wii U to the guy at the front desk, or the front area, and he was like, she's like, is this the same thing or different from the regular Wii? And he's like, yeah, kind of. He's like, it's just like the Wii, but with like HD graphics. And so she was like, well, like, does it take all new games, or can you play the old games? And he was like, well, it does have its own games, but like you can play the new games, but it's really complicated on how you play it and how you set it up. And so she was like, well, is there, like I'm looking for this game and this game. And I think at the time it may have been like Mario Kart or Smash Brothers or one of the popular names. Right. And he was like, yeah, it's on there, but it's not really that great of a game. Yep. Really, the system's not great. And so the other guy came in and he just came from the back. And this is why I mess with him hardcore. He was like, well, no. He's like, I actually like that game a lot. He's like, this is actually a really fun game. I've put in like 20, 30 hours into the game. I can't remember what it is. And he was like, yeah. The other guy was like, kind of like, yeah, but like, with the second screen, it just like overconflict. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about, bro. Like, I really like this. And so she's kind of looking back and forth on him. And I had it day one. And I was like, nah, honestly, I really like it too. Like, if you really think he will enjoy that, and plus, like, if he doesn't like that, Call of Duty is on there too, and like that is a whole lot of fun. And he's the Call of Duty, yeah. And so he, jumped in with the asynchronous, and well, he didn't say asynchronous, but he was like, one person could play on the tablet, the other person could play on the TV, and you guys could play together. and she thought that was really cool. So she like went ahead and bought it. That guy turned around and actually became the store manager. And I'm like, yo, bro, like we even had a conversation after that. Like, did you fire that cat? And he's like,
Right.
well, I can't say that I fired him, but he doesn't work at this establishment. Like, thank you. We don't need people like that. And like, it's cool when you do get people like that. You know what I'm saying? Where people will actually stand up. But like, man, the masses, like even in that moment, I'm like, man, I'm getting those G4 vibes. I'm getting those G4 vibes heavy.
But see, that's the thing. Like that spawns across pretty much all technology at this point, because at some point you're gonna hire somebody that has a bias. Yep. So I've had that situation to where we walked into AT&T years ago, and this is when I was still stationed in Alaska. So Alaska has somewhat of like a monopoly, if you will. There's like a specific carrier there, and they only allow AT&T to be there. Like Verizon and the other ones cannot be there. So and it may have changed over time because I was there back in like 2010. But ultimately at that time, that's how it was. And my wife at the time, she wanted to get rid of her iPhone for the new Samsung at that point in time, or one of the HTC ones or something like that. And there was a lady at the AT&T literally talked her out of trading her phone in to keep her iPhone. And it was because at that time, as y'all know, like iPhone was the big dog. And if you didn't have an iPhone, you were a peasant. Like that's what it was.
I mean,
it's still in a way like that. But people open up their minds a little bit more now, because now you can actually see it, and you don't have to depend on other people to educate you. Because, like Jay said, this is the age of information. So it was so much relying on the retailer to be educated back then, to where I can only imagine if I was to go and interview for any of these positions, I wouldn't even dare you to ask me if I have any knowledge on it. Because in reality, when I walk to these stores now, they're just as clueless as the next person. So I come in there with the information. And that's when my cousin, when she used to work for GameStop, she was like, we hate people like you, because you come in and you know everything already. So she said, we can't stand y'all. Like,
we hate you.
That's wild. Yeah. So I, as a resident Apple fanboy, right? But I understand, like, the whole point is to tell the truth and understand who the product is for, right? So my mother would never switch. She likes her Android. So I'm like, well, if that's what you like, what we're gonna do is we're gonna get you this Google Pixel. And she's like, well, why am I getting that? I said, remember that Samsung phone you had? Remember how it had all that stuff on it and all those applications that you didn't even use, and you barely had space on your phone? Yeah. And she was like, yeah, it did have a lot of stuff. I said, you get a Google Pixel, it's only Google stuff on there, and it's built specifically for that phone. So you will get the better performance, and you'll get a better deal out of it in the long run using that phone. Plus, they tend to hold their value like iPhone too. So. So she's been using those ever since, and it's perfectly fine. It doesn't bother me. Like, you know.
Plus, like in those situations, like people need to understand, like especially as far as cloud is concerned, if all your stuff is on Android and Google Drive, stay in that ecosystem. If all your stuff is on Apple and Apple Cloud, stay in that ecosystem. If you like your Microsoft stuff, you like Game Pass and all that, stay in that ecosystem. If you like Sony and what they doing with their PlayStation Plus and all that, stay in that ecosystem. If you like Nintendo and you like how they do the virtual console and all that, stay in that ecosystem. It's a lot less of a headache,
and it's gonna save you money.
and it'll save you money. Now, because I used to be, I need to have every console. I ain't like that no more.
Nah, not anymore. Like I said, the Switch 2 will be my only one outside of VR. But that'll be my only.
Because like I'll have,
it's gonna hurt.
Because I have Nintendo because with me, I have Nintendo and I have Microsoft. Because to me, Microsoft and Sony are the same. Especially now with Sony realizing, oh crap, we can't make games that's $200 million and $400 million to make, because we're not seeing a return. So now they're in the same boat Microsoft, and people like, see, Microsoft had to go third party. Sony about to do it too.
They're about to be right behind you.
I mean, they already are. I mean, they're publishing games on Switch as we speak right now.
Yeah,
that's true.
Because I'm sorry, y'all remember when the PS5 first had the first trailer? Didn't they say Pathless and Sifu can't be played nowhere else?
They came up with all those things.
Oh yeah,
that same thing with Spider-Man 2.
Yeah, because you couldn't play it on the PS4. You had to have the PS5 to play it.
Look at the graphics of Stray. I'm like, give it like 6 months.
And my thing was, I'm like, it's gonna win some awards. People are gonna brag about it, but themselves numbers ain't gonna meet expectations. And I kid you not, what happened? 6 months after the Game Awards, Switch has one and Xbox has it.
Let me say it now. I'm gonna say it now, right now. I'm gonna say it as close to the mic as possible. Sony should probably port Astro Bot to Nintendo Switch.
I'm telling you, it's gonna save them in the long run.
If Master Chief gets into Smash, Astro Bot's getting into Smash. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
If Master Chief gets into the next Smash, Astro Bot's gonna be in the next Smash. It's gonna be the Sony representative. It's gonna be the Microsoft representative. Watch.
Yeah. So it wasn't for going back to the topic we were talking about before. It wasn't for the lack of trying with Nintendo, because I'm currently wearing this little thing right here, right? So like, they sent you to these things and they told you basically effectively what happened at E3 is what happened in select cities. And they're going to do the same thing with Switch 2 right now too. So they're going to sit you there in a closed environment. Hey, this is the system. This is how it works. This is the successor to this system. Do you remember this system? Do you remember Wii? Well, this is the successor to Wii, and it has all these things. It has HD graphics. It does this, blah, blah, blah. Play these games. Look at these experiences. And then they hype you up before you leave and stuff, so you remember the name of the console. So you like screaming Wii U before you leave. You're screaming Switch before you leave. You're screaming Switch 2 before you leave. Like it's a whole hype thing. So you're able to go out and as a person, you nearest neighbor your product for them. And it's just like the media was so powerful then at the time. And obviously there's ties behind that. I can't directly link the ties to third party, but we know that there are stories out there about Gerstmann Gate and stuff like that. Game Journal Pros, like you try to make it about some lonely guys wanting to harass this girl with her text adventure game. It wasn't about that at all. It was because gamers found out that gaming media was colluding. And that's when you find out, you're like, oh, these controls are unintuitive. This is the pinnacle of graphics. The graphic fidelity, they're all using the same words and same terms, and they're colluding to do so. And there was an entire group that was found of them doing that. What game they're going to praise, what game they're gonna shit on. All of that was happening. And they shouted it down so bad to say gamers were dead. They came up with so many bashing articles at the time to cover up their tracks. They're like, if we shout loud enough, they'll ignore the thing.
Even though, like, because I remember when we was watching Game Trailers, Jeff Keighley's show, and you're like, why is Michael Pachter on there? Ain't that a conflict of interest?
Yeah,
huge conflict of interest.
It was a huge conflict of interest. But they were, once again, that's why y'all think I be laughing at Jeff so much. Because I'm like, bro, you can't sit there and get mad at Nintendo and Microsoft for ditching your summer games. You brought this on yourself, partner. Karma ain't fun, is it? Karma is not fun. You sitting there laughing and dancing when you thought E3 was dead. You thought everybody would come to your stuff. That blew up in your face, didn't it?
And I get the little arguments and stuff like that. Well, Wii U failed because of blah blah blah, and I'm like, but it made money though. So did it really fail?
How you fail and you got $10 billion in cash in the bank?
Yeah. Well, it's got to sell a certain amount, and I'm like, oh, okay.
Who made that rule?
That's the Twitter crowd. Like they made that rule that you gotta be at this fidelity, you have to be at this frame rate, you have to be at this sale number. It's how they Steam Deck sold less than Wii U. Exactly. Like you don't hear nothing about Steam Deck numbers, like at all. And
even at launch, like Wii U had 3 million out the gate.
Yeah,
out the gate it had 3 million.
Steam has mentioned their numbers one time, and they haven't mentioned it since then. And like I said, I'm pretty sure that OLED is not selling all that well either. But once again, that's something that I don't know why the consumer base thinks that OLED is just this cost-efficient thing that is going to not affect them if Nintendo was to put OLED in this device. That money is going to come back on you to spend. Like it's going to be a more expensive console. This is a reason why Sony went from an OLED on the Vita to just a regular screen when they did the 2000 version. There's a reason. But I don't know. Like I posted earlier this week too, when I kept seeing those narratives of like, okay, Nintendo's just copying these new PC handhelds, or like Risky would say, oh, the PC handhelds are the competition. I have yet to hear anybody other than the content creators talk about Neo's 3 and the new Legion Go S. Those things are coming out this year, and nobody has mentioned those things. And even I'm looking at Neo 3, and that's pretty cool because it's a modular device. It's a cool device, but their devices are expensive, like super expensive. But there's nobody talking about those devices unless you're like a Linus Tech or somebody in the PC crowd, but it's not widespread like it is with the Switch.
Nope.
I think it was Wolfdan that said, well, the Switch isn't exactly unique because one of those I think it was Ioneo. No, it wasn't the Ioneo, it was the other one because it had the detachable Joy-Cons.
Oh,
and I'm like, it's not the same. It's not the same.
And most people that make that comment have not used that thing. Like, do you see how many buttons are on that one device? Like, there's a left and a right, there's a scroll wheel, and it's huge. And not to mention, like, even when you talk about, I saw somebody mentioning, well, the Legion Go has a D-pad. There's a reason for that because you can't use each one separately for 2 controllers. That was the purpose of the Switch. Like, I don't know. I mean, and they're trying hard. They're trying hard, like, but at the same time, nobody's gonna go buy those devices.
I could probably do like 2 or 3 podcasts just going through all this garbage, all these videos that just say things as if they're fact, and there's so many holes in the argument.
Yeah,
it's just wild to me that some of the stuff that's said, and they're like, the Steam Deck OLED or whatever is like somebody just mentioned in the chat that just came out. Like, the Switch has been doing this since 2017, and they came out with their OLED a couple years ago. And, now you're expecting them to do it all over again. And I'm like, you know what costs are, right? Like, do you want this thing to be $500 or not? Like, and if it comes out being $500, then the first thing you complain about, the price is overpriced for what it is.
That's the other thing. That's the other thing. I mean, everybody knows Nintendo is not going to charge people ridiculous. They know they're not going to do it. That's why I'm like,
that's just why y'all, by the way. That's all the names.
That is funny. But yeah, like, everybody knows, like, if you've been following gaming for at least, I'd say at least 2 gaming generations, Nintendo ain't going to overcharge folks' pocket. So no, they're not. Why are you sitting up here acting like, oh man, they're going to do all this and this? First, they're not. No. You shouldn't even be expecting them to. Second, because that's one of their core things. One of their core things is being, okay, look, we still got to make it affordable. I'm sorry, $699 for that PS5 Pro is not affordable, because when PS6 comes out, y'all, okay.
So I'll say this. I'll ask this question in the simplest way possible. What is the difference between a PS5 and a PS5 Pro? How do you explain that to the average person?
The tech enthusiast has to do
it. I don't even think you can do that. Like you said, with the average person,
the average person,
there's no way you can go in and confidently say it improves your games, because we've seen it hurt some games.
Yeah, some games, and then other games, it's like there's literally no visual or running difference.
No, like I couldn't sell it to anybody. Like, I have a pretty easy time selling the Quest 3 to people. I have an easy time selling the Switch to people. Hell, I have an easy time selling my retro handhelds to people. But that PS5, the PS5 Pro, I can't justify the upgrade.
Nope.
Even as a gamer, I could probably Al Sharpton my way into like PS5 Pro, like trying to like finagle my words a little bit, and I could say, okay, the improvements are here. Your common consumer doesn't care. No. Because in reality, I've seen, like, even with my mom, like I said, she's as casual as you get. She still to this day is like, the only console I've ever loved and want to keep is my Wii. That is her still to this day. She even bought a Switch and was like, nah, take it back. And because she tried. So she stayed with the Wii. But even when I show her, like, we have a 65-inch 4K TV in the living room, she was like, I really don't see the difference. Like, it's bright and it's hurting my eyes, but she was like, other than that, like, I don't see the difference.
I remember getting into an argument with somebody, and I was explaining to them, I'm like, dude, I'll put it to you like this. Let somebody be at a family function. Let somebody bring a Wii in and put in Wii Sports and see how everybody gravitate and all you gotta do is play one game.
Bowling. There's no learning curve. You just you know it. You immediately know what to do.
Yeah, just put bowling in. Watch how everybody is playing. You can't do that with everybody. Like that's why I'm like, bro, it's funny because if you talk to everybody, oh man, you got to be graphics. You got to. I've heard people say, I can't play a game. I can't play anything that's not 60 frames a second. It hurts my eyes.
So speaking of narratives, before I get to this real quick, I just want everybody to be observant of some of the responses of what's going on and how they do their talks. I have heard, and this was actually Brian Altano. They start this conversation. They start this group conversation and say, "Hey, we're all dads, right? So we got little kids, right? So I'm glad that the Joy-Con, it's kind of small or whatever. This new Joy-Con is bigger. So I got my big man hands. Like it's those kind of narratives where they're just trying to do the whole thing where they're trying to say, hey, look, well, this is for smaller kids if the hands kind of thing. And I'm like, this same dude with these big old hands types on keyboards, uses a cell phone with a much smaller screen, which you have to literally cramp your hand to do certain things. Other controllers, the retro controllers, the retro consoles, the mini consoles and whatnot. I see you reviewing all these things and talking about how good they are and whatnot. And I'm like, the buttons are maybe a little bit bigger. And you're still cramping because they're trying to make it as small as possible. So they make these little retro things like this big, and you're bragging about those because you could pirate games on them.
Yeah.
So you'll go through all those confusing things, but the minute you start talking about Nintendo, we got to talk about how we have to massage the message like it's because we're talking about who's a man and whatnot based on the size of their hands. And I'm like, all right, so what are you saying? Because if that's the case, then everybody should have the biggest controller possible with the biggest space in between each button because
the Duke
men NFL players, they need these control, and they seem to not have no problem. They sit down and play on the same controller as you do. So
I will never forget the great gaming journalist Greg Miller and his glowing review of Zombie U. I'm being sarcastic, by the way.
We know.
I laughed at that whole review because I'm like, you ain't played this game, right, partner? You want to Call of Duty when you playing Resident Evil 2. That's what you were doing. You want to Call of Duty while you're playing Resident Evil 2. This ain't no fun and gun, bro. So,
but my thing is this: like when we look at the all of these other reviewers and everything else that went on with the Wii U going into the Switch. There was just so many narratives that got changed over time and what they were willing to accept, what they really didn't like or what they did love. Because like I said, Brian Altano was actually one of the go-tos for me at a point in time. Like whenever he was on their NVC podcast, like him and Jose, I'm like, all right, cool. If those two are on along with what's his name? What's his name? Pierre?
Yeah,
Pierre, I was like, if I saw those three, I'm like, okay, I'm watching, I'm listening. But then at some point, it's like it just went left with the Wii U. And I've even heard hearing some currently now, even like when I was listening to Game Explain earlier when they were doing their 48 hours after the Switch 2 announcement video, just hearing how people danced around like the confusion of the Wii U. I'm like, where was the confusion?
There was none.
Like I didn't understand it, but I mean, we've said that time and time again. So to then come back current and see the same type of confusion that's trying to be held for the Switch 2 when you've only seen it one time at this point. Like you haven't even seen it.
I'll just say this point. The confusion was had in 2011 and 2012 when nobody else, no regular person has had access to this system. Right. And in addition to that, in 2010 and a little bit later, you were rumoring about what the system was going to be. And y'all were pretty fucking close to what it was. Nintendo streamed in at the time, or Project Cafe or whatever. Yeah. Y'all were rumoring about this. So as soon as it's revealed, you're confused?
Right.
Well, remember 2011 was when EA came out, said they loved it. It's going to be a game changer. Ubisoft said it was going to be a game changer. Activision, they was all on board. 2012, all of that went out the window. That's why I was like, y'all really do need to read Ask Iwata. That book is amazing to get the idea of how that man mind worked. I'm like, that's why Yamaguchi made you the successor. They pissed him off and they kept habitually crossing the line to where he's like, all right, bet.
We'll let the game talk, and that's it. And then
we'll
market directly to our customers, and that's gonna be it. We'll cut you out.
He came out, he apologized, cut his salary, did what he had to do with the 3DS, did what he had to do with the Wii U, and guess what happened? Now, gaming media, especially Western gaming media, is like, we don't know what stuff is. Like, y'all didn't know last time. We control the message. And oh, y'all want us to come to y'all thing? Nah, we ain't coming. We'll send you this direct video though.
And so somebody was trying to say that that there was a Wii U price cut, and I'm like, no, not really, because
not really.
It never really went below $300, and the whole point of them quote unquote dropping it to $300, basically just getting rid of the $300 SKU. I meant the $300 SKU and replacing it with the $350 SKU. Yeah. Was because it was right before the holidays when the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One were about to come out. So they're like, well, we can't be $350 right next to these guys at $400, so we got to do something. So that's what they decided to do, and gave you a game with it, and the rest is history. And then Mario Kart, tore it up the following year. So.
Mario Kart and Smash.
Mario Kart and Smash, like literally, that was the majority of Nintendo's profit that following year. And what I don't understand is that people pretended that didn't happen. And that it was a 3DS carrying Nintendo the entire generation.
Yeah, it was.
I hate that narrative of, it's a Nintendo 3DS and a Nintendo Wii U. It's Nintendo, bruh.
It's just Nintendo.
That's how you know. That's how you know. I'm like, y'all full of crap, dude. I'm like, if you put both of those, so yeah, Wii U sold 14 mil, but 3DS ended up with what? Right up under 100. It was right up under 100.
That's good
so
money, man.
They still had profit. That's why I was like, dude, they was making money. Like I'll tell you this, I know if you just have the Xbox game division and you just have just the PlayStation game division, if Microsoft does not back the Xbox game division,
it's gone.
Guess what happens? There is no Xbox One. If PlayStation, I'll give PlayStation this.
They hold up.
PlayStation was fine until Microsoft came. Because when Microsoft came, they thought they could keep up with the Joneses.
And they started spinning each other.
You ain't got money like that. And Sony didn't realize they didn't. So sitting up thinking about it, you're like, okay, Sony probably would have stayed. They probably would have made it with the PS4, kinda. Because remember, PS3 had a callback on that because the HDMI cords was melting.
Yeah, and then that yellow light of death they were having too.
Yep. So they had. That's why there was a $2 billion loss. Both of those consoles had $2 billion losses. Microsoft for the red ring of death, and which they tried to hide by putting it in with the Surface situation, and Sony had the
phones. They had the Ericsson phones.
Yeah, so they tried to hide it with that. I'm like, bro, $2 billion of losses is not acceptable. When you're a company like Microsoft and Apple, a bill would be acceptable if you're in an R&D year where you're bringing out a new product. That's depending on what it is. Yep. So because they're $1 trillion company, but it's never acceptable for $2 billion. Never. No. That's never acceptable as
crazy.
That's crazy.
That's crazy.
It's just wild, man. It's just the lengths that people will go. Like they will go and say things that will actually put PlayStation and Xbox in a bad light just to make sure Nintendo is also in a bad light.
Yeah, and it makes no sense.
It's just wild to me. Like you're gonna tell me this system isn't profitable because all they need to do is sell one game to be profitable, and you got all these other systems out here that have a worse tie ratio than Nintendo does, and they have way more games available.
Yeah,
it doesn't make any sense to me. And the more games available, the more likely somebody's going to buy a game. So your tie ratio should be higher, right?
Yeah. And
you telling me that two systems with over 1 billion pieces of software that should have been sold because they were available. You got over 1,000 plus games in their library or whatever. So you should have 1 billion in sales, and then you don't on those platforms versus a failed system, like supposedly failed, 13 million or whatever is a failure. And I'm like, well, it's a lot of consoles that failed. Then that's the case, and including the ones that you're trying to say, effectively replace Switch right now. So,
right.
Like they just keep moving. They keep moving the goalposts more and more and more. But I'm just gonna go ahead and go through this because I haven't really myself given an official response to how this goes. So I'll put us on the side here, and I guess we can play the trailer. I don't know how well this is gonna go as far as audio. I don't even really need to have the audio playing, to be honest with you.
Probably not. Yeah, because it's not like they said anything.
Yeah, yeah. I'll just mute it. And we'll go from there. But effectively, my main thing is just that they made this so clear.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, if you felt like it was enough of what they needed to show, or do you feel like they could have done more?
No, I think the goal is right. The target audience is all the people that own a Switch, right?
Correct.
And they aren't gaming press. They aren't diehards like us. They aren't anything else. Like, and a lot of people don't have the Switch OLED. So they're like, we will give you the things that the OLED has, right? And we'll give you more of a premium feel.
Yeah.
And that's kind of more what I was kind of like, that's good to do without saying a word, because these are just sounds and whatnot right now. Like this entire thing works without any audio, which I think is probably brilliant. And they focus in on saying, "Hey, look, there's textures on this plastic." I don't get the swiveling of the Joy-Cons.
I know why. Because remember that manufacturer, which was the cause for the drift flow across all. People don't want to remember that, but it wasn't just the Joy-Cons. It was the original Xbox controllers and the original DualSense 5. They were all done by the same company. They dropped that company. They using the same company that 8-Bit though does. So that's why they put and that's one of their signature things, putting that ring around it to keep the drift from happening.
Yeah, this right here though was a statement though, because I don't think anybody was expecting this. Not even
Mario Kart 7.
I don't even think your boy was expecting this, and he was basically, he got to go ahead to talk about it first, because all the gaming press and all the people that were doing events or whatever had already gotten notification that this was about to happen, because you got to prepare to host these events and get hired to host these events or whatnot, right? So they already knew anyway behind the scenes. Just somebody needed to say something first, and he just happened to be it or whatever, right? So, but I don't even think he was under the impression that there was no game was going to be shown. But this right here to me is like,
they were going to show something.
They were going to show something.
Yeah,
this is like a Mario Kart cross. It's like not Luigi Circuit. It reminds me of like Moo Circuit.
It does. I kind of wish they would have used like the meme with Luigi doing the death stare. I kind of he kind of looked like Fat Plumberish right there. Like he gained a little bit of weight in that shot right there.
100%. But I was telling people, like, even though we didn't get a quote unquote confirmation of a DLSS or whatever the case may be as far as power is concerned, which Nintendo never does, but you're going to see, like, even in this trailer, you can see that probably a lot of the power went into the animation. Like, even when you see, like, with Mario jumping and how his face transforms, I'm pretty sure a lot went into animation, because that really speaks volumes when you have games like this, because you can make a racing game to where everything's very static and you're just racing around in circles. But
Jack, I need the 4K graphics. I need the 4K 120 frames a second.
For what?
For what? Exactly. In a Mario
you'd end up in 24th place, because you're not gonna win anyway.
Yes.
But
I need to see when I lose. I need to see me just get destroyed by a blue shell. You don't understand.
This game alone has me wondering about the external display patent, and I'm wondering if that's a thing. If they're actually going to go through with it. Especially since there's a USB-C port on top now.
That'd be crazy. Like, you think it would just be one of those very light screens that you can put up there?
Yeah, like basically a double of this in a harder shell or whatever. So because obviously that's going to get more abuse than the actual console itself. Right. So you want to make like a durable shell external display, and it just connects like. And if it's USB-C up there, so you can do all kind of stuff. You can do data transfer, and you can connect effectively there. And it's not just like there could be gameplay stuff. It could be touchscreen. Who knows?
So we talking about in box or release later?
I'm thinking later. I don't think they would do. I don't think because now you're talking about an additional cost. So
yeah.
I'm thinking maybe they do like a bundle or something later, or they introduce it as a separate product. Switch to you, if you will, but something like that. Or I mean, because last thing they want to do is a PlayStation Portal take on this, because there's no need to spend $300 twice for effectively what Wii U gave you out of the box for $350. So
that would be crazy though to find
would.
like a viable way to make it look clean, because I've seen other just your everyday people do the same thing with like the ROG Ally to kind of have a double screen, but it looks bad. It's very bulky. It doesn't match, and then you still see like the USB cable, and so it doesn't look aesthetically pleasing the way that Nintendo probably would do it.
It's like they thought about all the complaints too, because I'm looking at this here as well. That they killed the entire slot for the system to dock. Yeah. More than likely for more airflow, but also because people were wedging the system in there wrong, or it was swelling inside of the dock, things like that. So you don't have to worry about your screen getting scratched, the back of your system getting scratched, or anything like that, because you have so much leeway from the top. So that it's kind of like they thought about all the issues here, and they got a little, I guess, display icon here to let you know this dock. But I'm fairly certain there's Ethernet on the back of here and probably some other USB ports. I guess the question is, can you do external storage like you did with Wii U? We know the SD cards will be there, but I'm wondering if they'll do.
That reminds me, I need to go on to pick up me a 1.5 terabyte.
You definitely probably will for these, because I'm wondering if, because third parties are cheap, so I'm wondering if they're going to do the please download the rest of your game thing.
Well, I know that the first party games ain't gonna be that big. Right. They'll be big, but they ain't gonna be as big as like third party. But third party is gonna be ginormous.
Well, that's what because I was watching earlier. That's what Nintendo Prime was talking about, and he was saying that there was a third party developer mentioning like, hey, for these type of games, you're gonna have to do the install. Similar to what PlayStation and Xbox does, to where like Nintendo, you won't have to.
Well, at this point, you should be used to that. At this point,
you should be.
I mean, because this has been going on since what, 8th gen? These installs, so you should be used to this by this point.
But I just don't want Nintendo to do it. I don't want them to follow.
I don't want them to do it either. But the problem is, and Shadow, you already know this, it's third party. That's the problem. They do not code to the metal, which means they're dragging and dropping, doing object oriented, and that they don't clean up the code, which means there's a lot of fluff when you do that, and it is what it is at this point.
I would just love it if they actually use the benefit of these cards. Like, so I need to explain this for people, right? The whole reason that the Xbox had a hard drive, the 360 had a hard drive, the Xbox One had a hard drive, and the Series X and Series S have SSDs is because the disk drive is freaking slow.
Yeah.
Right? And they're using this to cache data, and there isn't a fast media platform for them to be able to reference repeatedly. It's not just the speed, it's your latency as well. Because if you're doing repeated tasks, those are repeated writes that a disk, or repeated reads that a disk it just doesn't have the seek time for that. There's going to be delays and whatnot. So they came up with hard drives and say, hey, look, we can stream the data to the hard drive, and the hard drive will stream data to RAM. So there isn't that much of a noticeable delay. But that whole thing being there and having the SSDs even faster or whatever, right? So you don't have as much of a noticeable delay. All that existed because you were using this medium. So that's I have a driver timeout. Okay, great, cool. But all that existed because of that. So, but now you have a system right here, right now. Doesn't need a disk drive. It has another form of media that is not only, I won't say faster, but is far less latent than any of those drives. So you don't need the high bandwidth because you can anything that you read from here, you can just go back and read again, go back and read again, go back and read again, go back and read again. That's the point of them having these ROMs on here, and that's why they work so well.
Right.
And that's why you don't have to do installs unless it's just a really big game or some type of patch or something to go along with it or whatever. You just pop the cartridge in and you're able to play.
Yeah.
So, I really need people to understand that because they feel like this system needs to have a giant SSD in it so it can compete with other systems that have this problem. Yeah. So even the digital versions of these systems, they still have the same problem too because they're still storing games on a more latent media than these game cartridges are.
Right.
So that's the issue there. They're doing the PC thing, and I'm like, well, the PC thing has an inherent issue because of these cards. So, did I lose my cam?
Yeah, you froze a little bit. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I think I heard it best. If you were to have a M.2 in this thing, then you're going to have a bunch of heat issues because you're going to have heat sink, which then in turn would add to the cost. And that was where I enjoy that Nintendo gives me an option to expand my memory as big as I want to, in the nature that, yes, people complain about, the initial Switch only having 32 gigs out of the box. And I'm like, look, if I was never going to save internally anyway, let me spend that money elsewhere. Because you coming to me and saying, okay, well, here's a terabyte and you doing Apple prices, like that's where we kind of get into a problem. Because when you look at Apple products, while they're great, you're talking about a jump from, let's say, 256 to 512 gigabytes that may cost you $200, to where in reality that should only cost me maybe 50, if not lower than that. So I'd rather do that through like these express cards, which I've never experienced or never used because they're newer. But I would imagine if Nintendo's betting on it, and then SanDisk is going out their way to really like, hey, these are the new big thing. Like, yeah, I mean, it's going to have the speeds that it needs to run these games, and you not sit there for hours on end waiting for a game to load.
Yeah, I just hate that they promoted it as a feature, and the power of such things, said thing, when it was a fix.
Yeah, it really was a fix. Yeah,
it was a fix. It was a fix because guess what? If you had a cartridge back in the day, instantaneous loading. Like there was no load times or anything like that. Like, and PS1 was bad. Those seat times were horrible,
ridiculous.
You had to like. There were some PlayStation games had mini games built in while you waited for the game to load.
Yep.
That's how bad it was back then.
Yeah, that's how bad it was. It's hilarious when you think about it now, but yeah.
Because you would just sit there and then just hear chin, 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 chin. I'm like, Jesus, what is taking so long to where like if I had on my 64, it was quick.
It was there.
Like you could actually go do, because we did this in college. You could actually turn it on, order a pizza, come back, and sometimes some still sitting there. You're like, God dang.
And it's just wild to think of that. Nintendo could they got plenty of ammo to just like go back and forth with them on stuff like this if they wanted to. And Nintendo has engineers too. They work and they know how this stuff goes. They have like resident people that just loves to talk nerdy about CPUs. And Nintendo's like, no, we're cutting you off. You said too much. Stop. Because they start talking about certain registers and stuff like that. And other developers are like, we just know what the SDK is. We have no idea what you're talking about. So it's just one of those things where they could just say, hey, look, that thing you're talking about, you're covering up a flaw. We don't have that flaw. So just come buy the cartridge and it's fine. Also, if you other developers, if you catered for your game to work off the cart, you wouldn't need all these extra downloads. Like, but that's one of those things where it's not Nintendo's job to tell you how to do yours. You have a third-party publisher that pays for your project. You have an SDK. You have documentation. Read the documentation. Figure out what you're about to do if you want to do a project here. And it's in your best interest to start your project here because you can port easily from what we have to elsewhere. So why wouldn't you? Like, it's just one of those things where here's my thing. You're going to make a PC build of a game. You're going to port it to Xbox and PlayStation. Then when you realize you're not selling your game as much, you're going to spend all this money trying to shoehorn it onto a system that's not designed the same way those other ones are.
There you go.
Yep.
Why do that? Elephant in the room. I will always promote my own podcast for that. The elephant in the room, like code for the Switch.
Prince of Persia, Lost Crown, and Yeast 10 Nordics show you that that's the proper decision to make.
Yes. It's just it benefits everyone at that point. But if they do that, then the game will suffer. No, it won't. The other platforms, they'll just get into 4K.
Because that's what happened with Ubisoft figured that out. Because they're like, dude, if you go and look, yes, they built it for Prince of Persia for the Switch. When you got to PS5, Xbox Series S and X, now they can put it in 120, 4K 120 frames a second, and they ain't got to worry about it. Unlike Marvel's Avengers, where they had to send that email telling you if you want to damn play in 60 frames a second, it's locked to 1,000 to 1080. If you want to play in 4K, it's locked to 30.
Yeah,
that's the email. That's what they sent for Marvel's Avengers. So,
like I said, if you're first party, I get it. Do your thing because it's going to be exclusive. But when it comes down to multi-plat, like, okay, go for the lowest common denominator from your specs as far as what you concern as far as power is, then work your way up. I just dialing that down just makes life so much more difficult. Or if you're in that situation that you had what Warframe in, it took another company to understand what your problem was, and then made all your other versions better. So it's like that should never happen. But
should never happen.
That's why I just think about the Witcher 3 postmortem, and they're like, dude, we spent 2 months not knowing that the Switch had a DSP. And we were writing audio threads to the CPU and wondering why we were getting slow performance. Like things like that, man. Like that's just wild. Like, why are we? When I guess my grok interpretation is that I hold the publishers accountable. Yes, because it's their job. If your game is supposed to be everywhere, it's your job to make sure it's there in the best way possible so people will buy it, right? It's not on Nintendo to make your game easier to develop.
No.
They have no problem. Nintendo has no problem. Figure out what they're doing.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair, Shadow, Capcom is allergic to money. They break out in hives. They break out in hives if you ask them.
The world of screaming Mega Man, Capcom's like, what? I don't understand. What?
We can't. I'm sorry. I don't speak Klingon. What Capcom is saying. So
Capcom's like, profit? No, Sony profit, just cuts us a check. We don't need our own money.
Well, what is profit? What is this profit you speak of? Is it part of the One Ring?
Yeah, Okazi talking about different things. Yeah, like cash misses, assembly, all that kind of stuff. Those are things that Nintendo is known for building their hardware around. Like, they're like, hey, we're going to make this thing where, hey, you think this hardware is weak or whatever, but when you write your game, you won't have no issues because we're taking care of everything under the hood.
Right.
Like, that's what the GameCube CPU was specifically for. It's like, hey, all those things for a branch heavy CPU, if you write branch heavy code, you don't have to worry about long wait times for the rest of the pipeline to finish. Like, if we promise 7 stages, it's done in 7 stages, usually 4. So like, you're like, hey, I wrote code. Ooh, compilation is done. We ain't got no errors. Look at that. No syntax problems. No runtime issues. Game is up and running.
Yeah.
That's, those were the things that Nintendo was talking about. And they're like, well, but you don't have all the gigaflops. Like, you have all the gigaflops, then you have all the problems. And then you spend another 9-10 months just trying to get stuff up and running that people can't even see.
Right.
Like, we ain't even talking about graphics yet. We're talking about in it.
Yep.
So that's just the wild stuff to me, man. I guess I need to get my camera back working, but I don't even feel like it right now. This whatever. I just had a driver issue, and then I'm having some Windows 11 issues right now that I got to work out later. But
I love Windows.
It's whatever. That OS is
it's
the version of Windows 11 I have is at its peak right now. So apparently,
I think Sigma Sound and Media said he has a question. Shadow.
Oh, well, let's see what we got here. He said, "Can I ask a question slightly off topic, but still on topic?" Okay, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Ask your question, Sigma.
That's going to be interesting, Nightwolf. Because I think GameStop can't afford to play stupid. They really can't.
They can't. Not this time.
They can't afford. They can't afford to.
Not this time.
And especially you got what? Because isn't Reggie still there too?
No, he left. Now. He left. But they are, man. Hey, between the stock thing that happened last a year and a half ago and the just gaming numbers going down in general, they can't afford to play.
Can't afford to play stupid.
Yeah, they can't afford to play favorites. Not this time.
So stuff like this happens a lot, right? So the Wii U's GPU was sold as a separate I can't think of the name of the MCM. It was sold as a multi-chip module to basically enterprise, and they're used for like routers and switches and stuff like that, or other enterprise products where you're like how can I say this, like the little terminal computers. So those are used a lot. And there's if I can find the video, there's actually a commercial of them promoting essentially the E6670, which came from the Wii U GPU, and they put that on a multi-chip module and sold it to enterprise. So that is the design that they took and they used. They're like, hey, well, this thing, Nintendo made a whole bunch of these, or we made a whole bunch of these for Nintendo, so we're going to use them elsewhere. That happens on consoles a lot. Like you can literally get the PS5 APU. It's bent a little bit. Some of the GPU SRAM isn't there, but all intents and purposes, the CPU, the RAM, all that stuff is exactly the same. You can buy that entire module and you can put it inside of a computer and play around with it if you want to. But those things exist. So yeah, this AMD actually did sell that as a product. But there were other things that the Wii U had that was custom that there's a lot of registers in there that people still don't know what those are. Like after a full chip work scan, like people like unknown block. We don't know what this is. And for a long time, people were just saying, well, it doesn't have all the flops, so therefore it can't do the thing. And I'm just thinking it never stopped Nintendo. So you have to figure that whatever they were doing, like just imagine if an Assassin's Creed game took advantage of what Breath of the Wild did. Because all of that was possible at some point. So
but it take away from the ultra realism, so we can't do that. And it's games and service, so we can't do that.
It's just wild to me that, like Nintendo has to show everybody what to do with their own engines. They're just like, oh, we'll play around with Havoc. Oh, we'll play around with Unreal. Like,
I mean, they didn't have to show Platinum or Harada.
I don't know. I see these demonstrations and stuff, and then people pretend like it just doesn't apply to them, or doesn't apply to Nintendo at all. They're othered all the time. And I'm like, just months before this console was unveiled, there were articles bragging about how awesome the Tegra X1 was.
Mm-hmm.
And now?
now we don't know what the Elemental demo was. What are you talking about? That isn't impressive. I don't know what you mean. Whatever do you mean? Xbox One performance and 11 watts. That's literally what they were bragging about in that video.
Yep.
So I knew these questions were going to come up at some point too. I guess we got to go ahead and talk about that because I guess they want me to talk about the technical parts of this that you can't really see They weren't really shown. Game Idea guy kind of responded to Chris Gamer, talking about DLSS. He says tech illiterate when it comes to tech. Does DLSS only bump up games when the frame rate is uncapped or no? And we got a pretty much good answer here. So it's already happening in other games anyway. You have dynamic resolution in games that exist right now.
Right.
Tekken 7 and Tekken 8 are great examples of that. Like you will never know because it's every other frame. But as soon as the game engine predicts high frame time, like above 18 milliseconds for any frame to be drawn, it will dial down the resolution to match whatever the frame time would be for it to complete that one frame. So you'll see, you'll be playing a game in 1080p, and then you'll notice like some ghosting and some pixelation, like for a fraction of a second. You could barely tell it because it only happened for one frame. For one frame or maybe 2 frames or so, your game is now at 540p, and then it jumps right back up. So effectively, what DLSS is doing is saying, hey, look, we're going to internally, we're going to always do this. We're going to internally render this game at 540p or whatever, and then sample around every pixel and redraw it to make it look really clean. And it's going to do that before the frame is drawn, and then present you the reconstructed frame in 1080p or 1440p or 4K even. And that's how you get that type of performance out of drawing at a lower resolution. That's effectively what DLSS is doing. It's saying, hey, look, we're gonna take this 540p image, turn around and redraw it and upscale it. Now, obviously, that means you'll lose some detail, but nowhere near as bad as FSR was, because FSR is like more screen space kind of sampling, and DLSS is per pixel. So every pixel is looked at and resampled and redrawn and updated, so it looks a little bit more realistic. So things like shadows, reflections, and other things like that, they don't look as weird, and you don't get that weird kind of jumpiness. I don't know if you remember any of the 6th generation games whenever they had to do like screen space reflections, or if there was a whole bunch of shadow maps going on, they would get overly pixelated, because you could only do that reflection at a certain resolution, and that became at the cost of that, right? So now with this upscaling, you can get that same quality reflection or that same quality shadow without there being any penalty on that, because the upscaling is so clean, you don't have to worry about that being an issue. There's plenty of tutorials and videos, and like there's a bunch of people you could probably follow. I could probably recommend. Maybe I should do a video on that too. But they just show you how they're playing around in Unreal Engine, and they will go and just plug in DLSS filters that work in Unreal Engine 5 and whatnot, and you can see how all these different things are affected. And then that way you'll be able to see the benefits. But DLSS will definitely be in this system. It's part of the Ampere architecture. It's also part of Lovelace, and this is a custom part, so we don't know what all kind of instructions are in here. And that's the other thing too. Nintendo does weird stuff, so you'll see like, hey, why is this old GPU in here? Well, it's not old to us anymore because we added new logic to it. So effectively, it will be whatever the new GPU is. They just took whatever's easier for them to print mass, unmask for a cheaper price, but with the same type of performance based on what they customize it for. So I would not be surprised if you start seeing DLSS 3.5 and 4 on this system going forward.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean, not necessarily that number, because NVIDIA has its own custom API for the system also. So it's going to have that Nintendo name to it, or to be the NVIDIA name to it. It'll be in DLSS 1 or some crap. Like they'll name it whatever they want to.
Right.
So I would say expect that. And I would say don't think that it's going to be exactly cutting edge. But it's going to surprise you, because you're going to be expecting to see Switch in a certain resolution, and it's going to look way cleaner than you think it's going to be.
I think it was pretty interesting too. Even though it's not DLSS, when you look at like PSSR, Jedi Fallen Order is kind of one of those games that have always kind of been janky in a way, but it took for those developers to go back, do the updates, and make those changes for it to be able to utilize PSSR, for it to function the way you would think it would out of the box, just because, just lack of education on how these things work. Thinking that it's just going to brute force it just because it exists. But you just got to go back as a developer and still do some work and give some patches to make this stuff function.
And that's one of the things why I think that that's where Switch 2 is going to have an advantage, because it's one system. It's not, hey, we made a Pro, now all your regular Switch games, go back and rewrite. No. If you want to publish a Switch 2 game, it's going to have these things. Yeah. So, and I crapped on PSSR a lot, because it is effectively just an overblown version of FSR. But I mean, Sony is doing what they can with what they have. So they're like, well, we'll dedicate extra shaders to this because we don't have it on the other platforms. We're using a CPU to redraw everything. And obviously that's going to come at a tax, right? Because now you're using RAM too now instead of SRAM. So they're like, well, we'll come up with our own way to do an algorithm where we write the SRAM on a GPU and then we get a better image. So, I mean, kudos to them for doing that. Because obviously AMD wasn't going to do it. So they came up with their own solution. But it's not going to be as accurate as DLSS, because it's still, the algorithm itself is inferior to NVIDIA's. That's just the facts of the matter there. It's just so funny to me, because both of these solutions are admitting with a straight face that the teraflops weren't getting you what we promised you.
Right.
We were supposed to give you raw, native, really, really realistic images, and we can't. So we're running lower resolutions and then upsampling it for you. Yeah. That's all you're doing is admitting. You're admitting from the beginning that everything that you promised was a lie.
Yeah. Because that's what they've been doing since the HD stuff started. They've claimed it was at something else. It wasn't. And it just got up-resed on the back end. And hence why we got all these. How do you have remasters of stuff that was supposedly already in HD?
It's HDer now.
Yeah, that's what I've said. I've never had an issue with stuff from the 6th gen and below and the Wii getting HD remasters, because they weren't in HD. They were in standard definition. So it makes sense. I had a problem with The Last of Us getting an HDer remaster when it came out on the PS3, and then not even 8 months later, it's on the PS4 as a remaster. That should never have happened. And then they remastered it again for PS5. Then they remastered it again for the PS4 Pro. I'm surprised they didn't remaster it again for the PS5 Pro, but
give them time.
We got time. So we got time.
Give them time.
This question here, this is a pretty good question, but this is more of, again, Nintendo being ahead of the curve and knowing what was going on. So this is what Wii U did. Wii U said, we don't need to do all this high SIMD stuff on the CPU, because it doesn't have to be that accurate. We can just run that local logic on the GPU and then go from there. Everybody clowned Nintendo, and then the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One came out, and they also had CPUs that were well underclocked, and they had way less SIMD on them than the old power architecture before that, because all of the SIMD was on the GPU. So all those developers that avoided Wii U ended up having the code like they would for Wii U anyway. So now that we have the low power APUs were more on the CPU side than the GPU side, basically it has affected gaming. It's affected PC gaming on another hand too now, because now all games, you getting a new CPU doesn't matter. Right. Because all your CPU does now is request draw calls, and the GPU is like working on it, and the CPU isn't really helping. There's no real heterogeneous compute anymore, unless you throw more RAM at it. And even then, it's just like that RAM the game is, depending on what game it is going to chew whatever RAM you throw at it. Like I had on my PC, I put 64 gigs of RAM in there, and Tomb Raider still use all of it. I'm like, what are you doing? You don't even need all this. And it's like, give me. And I'm not seeing any benefit in performance at all. It's just chewing RAM for whatever reason. So it's still going to be on a case by case basis for a lot of these games. but unfortunately, that's where things are going. It's CPU is almost irrelevant now. So it's just wild to me when you hear these conversations when people are talking about, weak CPUs and stuff like that. And I'm like, nah, you just need to run threads, man. And you can virtualize threads now anyway, so it doesn't even matter anymore. Everything can be emulated, and all the games are on hypervisors anyway. None of this stuff runs bare metal the way that it used to back in the day. Everything has a layer in between. So, like if you program a game on Switch and definitely Switch 2 now, you don't get to see real RAM. You get a virtualized instance of it. Your request goes to the hypervisor. The hypervisor goes down to the firmware. The firmware says, here's this randomized chunk of RAM that you get. You never know the real address, and it passes it back to you. So even the developers they're not privy to what they're doing. So it's just one of those things now where writing to the metal, unfortunately, even on Nintendo hardware, unless it's Nintendo themselves doing it, most of the developers are not touching it. So it's just you're just playing within a little wheelhouse there and running your game and seeing what happens on the other end. But crazy. I will say this, like I say with all other hardware, garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
Computer see ones and zeros, man. So whatever the result is, it's a result of what you did. Because I can point to any other pretty looking game out there that exists, and why does yours look like that?
Yeah.
So that's that's it. I am Mark Cerny with the flopflation, but Mark Cerny had been trying to warn people for a long time. Like
they wouldn't listen. They wouldn't listen to him.
He's not like Mark Cerny is not the brag. The only thing that Mark Cerny kind of like was untruthful about was the whole SSD thing, right?
Yeah.
But even then, he told you a kernel truth in between that. He's like, look, we chop our games up. That's what makes things faster. We chop our games up, and third parties just said the SSD is faster. Let's load all of it at one time, and now you still got load times on third party games. Yeah. Like it's just wild. Like because like all the other game, all the first party games, like it's almost instant. You jump straight into a game. You jump straight into a game on those Sony first party titles, and then you get a third party game, and you still got to go make a sandwich.
Yeah,
it's so wild.
Like, and that's the crazy part about it because we've been going through this since the PS3 of these false narratives of what we're going to provide you. And then sometimes you'll get what they promised you on the previous generation and the new generation. But like you said, it's almost as if they were working against themselves up until this point. And then on top of that, when we talk about like at the beginning of this generation this generation here, it was like load times are going to be almost non-existent. Whether they were hiding them or not, like going through the gaps of these rocks, we're gonna hide it that way. Or even when you look at Tears of the Kingdom, and I'm floating down out the sky, like there's genius ways of hiding it, but at the same time, it was like you have more power on this PS5 and this Xbox Series device, and like Shadow said, like I'm still seeing it, whether it's if the developer knows how to do it or not. Me as Sony, I'm gonna take some type of slight to that. Because now I'm going to look at that game and like, hey, call us first before you do whatever you do. Because now you got us looking stupid. Like we were telling people that loading screens should be invisible at this point and non-existent, and you come and pull the same stunt. Like, I need you to go read Mark Cerny's book, call him and do something. Ping him, message him, whatever you got to do to make your game do exactly as we intended. But I don't know.
Like Mark Cerny said, like he said before, like, they could have just used the sticker RAM, and that would have been a lot better cache. I mean, it's effectively there anyway because the SSD memory controller is just a stick of DDR4 that's sitting there, and it caches data in and out and passes it to the GDDR6. So that's effectively what's happening there. That's how it works. So that way you don't really see the slow transfer going from the SSD to RAM because obviously the RAM is several times faster than that. So you're going to wait at some point. There's going to be a choke point. So you have a stick of DDR4 that's sitting there that's being the go-between. So you're just slowly streaming in and out of that memory controller to regular RAM. So it's not that big of a problem, but it's only so much RAM. So if you're requesting, I don't know, several hundred gigabytes worth of data to be loaded all in one time in the game. Like, first of all, you shouldn't even, your render target should never be that damn big. But for whatever reason, there are games on this system I'm still waiting, and I should not be waiting to get into because they literally built the system with that in mind, and they still just find a way. They're just like, make the game as big as possible.
But Shadow, I don't, my grand vision. You're not seeing my grand vision.
They killing me with that.
my grand vision.
What's up, Nintendo Prime in the chat?
Because it kind of begs the point of, am I even developing my games for the console anymore? Because now we're hearing that Capcom might be having this problem with Monster Hunter Wild of trying to get it to run properly on PS5 and Series devices, and it's like, who are you coding for? Did you just, like you said, like, oh, did I just want to just throw my biggest attempt and my biggest vision, and this is what I want, and then figure out how it's going to run after the fact? That sounds like it's counterintuitive. Like,
kind of sounds like they should have did what they did for Rising on Switch, just make it for the system and then
I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, you shouldn't be trying to figure that out on the back end. Like, that should have been up front. Like, hey, how much can we get away with on the PS5 or the Series or whatever device that we're coding for? Because at the end of the day, you're now going to waste more time, because that game is supposed to come out in March?
I think March, yeah. Because I was gonna pick it up, but Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition.
Oh yeah, that's
not getting
that's
bought.
the purchase.
Sorry, Capcom. Sorry, Capcom.
For sure. But I don't see the point, because, like you said, Rise ran so well, and even when it got ported over to PC, they put it at 60 frames per second, and it still looked good.
It wasn't a problem.
It wasn't an issue. Yeah. So I don't know, and I get it. Iceborne was a great sell for you because it looked so, realistic. These monsters were fighting against each other, and you want to expound on that. Fantastic, but still make it work for the device you're gonna have it playing on. It's almost like the same thing with, I'm pretty sure Rockstar is doing that very thing, even though what we saw trailer wise may not look anything like the gameplay. I'm pretty sure they're still going to figure out how to make this function, even if it's at 30 frames, and then at that point everybody's sickness is going to go away. But it's something that they're still going to make sure that the PS5 itself can run it, the Series S itself is going to run it, and is going to run.
The Series S is destroying gaming. I don't know why
they put some respect on Series S name, man.
I'm about to say Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to run on the Series S, and then
it's destroying gaming. It's destroying gaming. Okay.
Because Rockstar is not stupid. They know where they need to make sure they put it everywhere. The only time you're just going to see the PC version come out later, but they're going to make sure it's going to run on all those consoles. And
it's going to get ported to everywhere. It's going to get ported to the PS5 Pro twice. Look, man, y'all saw what they did with Grand Theft Auto 5. Y'all saw what they did with Grand Theft Auto 5. How many times that game got remastered?
Man,
way too many. But the thing is, I almost forgot. They released it so much, almost forgot that it came out originally on the 360.
Yeah.
It's a PS3 game.
I totally forgot.
Yeah. So I'm like,
whopping 256 megs of RAM PS3.
That's why I'm like, bro, Grand Theft Auto 6 is about to get ported 3 times in the same generation.
Yeah. I mean, they're not stupid. Because, I mean, at that point in time, for me, I feel like the big push for a lot of these developers should be getting these manufacturers to allow cross-gen on a lot of their games, especially if you're multiplayer.
Yeah, I think that's what they're gonna have to do, because that's why you got some companies that already adapted to it. That's why you have they're like, look, if you buy it one place, all you gotta do is buy it one time. If you want to play on your PS5, if you want to play on your PC, just make sure you sign up.
Yeah,
make sure you give a show, because you got to sign up. We got to make sure that you verify that you did purchase it.
Right.
But you'll be able to, because Warframe does it, and a few other of those types of games do. I think First Descendant does it too, where hey, you bought it here. You can play it on your PC if you got a PC. Just verify. We got to verify and check that you did buy it.
Fortnite does the same thing.
Yeah. Or that you have a thing with us, and we'll just allow you to play it wherever.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's high time that they start doing it, because at one point they were saying Sony was the issue, like they just wouldn't agree to it.
Yeah, but they were. They because like Nintendo and Microsoft was like, yeah, we down. And Sony was like, no. Please no. We need that extra money. We kind of in the hole right now. Cause see, my checking is tied to my savings, and that was them. That was them.
I don't know how well this is going to show up here. I don't know if you guys can see it all or not.
This was the leak specs for it.
Yeah, so this is what it's supposed to be, right? And then they're suspecting whether it's 8 nanometers or not or whatnot. So 8 cores, right? Supposedly for the CPU, A78 AE instead of AC. Don't know what the difference is there, other than maybe they've been some of the SRAM for the cache. And I noticed that there's no real details there for that. So they're just like, hey, it's that type of CPU, go look it up. I'm like, so that leads me to believe that it's probably customized. So Nintendo either added a bunch or took a bunch away, depending on what it is. So they probably added L2 and took L3 away. Knowing them, that's probably what they did. And this memory here, I've seen this one around a lot. The 7,500 megatexels per second, so that's like around 100 something gigabytes per second total bandwidth. Now that's total bandwidth. They're saying 120 here, but maybe 106 sustained with 2 memory channels. So
that's not enough memory size, man. I need 48 gigs.
There you go.
Yeah,
that's not enough. You can't play my games.
Now, the enterprise nerd in me, I'm upset that there's no ECC memory. I need my memory error correcting at all times. I don't know what's going on here.
You'll be all right. You'll get over it. You'll get over it. You'll be all right.
And the Ampere GPU. So I've seen varying clock speeds here. I've seen up to a gigahertz for this. They're still talking about the same amount of shader cores, so 1536. And they're telling you the FP32 flops, right? So but my thing is, you don't have to use FP32. You can use FP16 and get twice the amount of flops here, depending on what you're trying to do. Because again, it doesn't have to be accurate. If you really wanted super accurate SIMD counts, then you would just use the CPU anyway. And we know that this CPU ain't really doing it like that. So unless you want a server, you don't want like really, really accurate flop counts like that. You just want to get the math done and sent back. As far as how accurate you get, like how it doesn't really matter if you're just crunching, say, I need this much matrix math to determine how many polygons are going to be transformed this way or whatever, right? You just need to know how many real quick, like how many millions or whatever, so you can pass that to the CPU and then pass it to RAM, and then it does whatever draw call it needs. It doesn't matter how accurate it is at that point anyway, because you're not going to see all the detail once it's rastered. So at no point are all the polygons on screen and they're presented to you and their accuracy matters. What matters is the textures that go on top and the resulting pixels that create the frame, right? So it doesn't really matter how much you throw out there to give you the math. And I that's another thing too. I don't think people were talking about too much. They kind of talked about it when Switch came out. They were talking about FP30, FP16 to let you know that it was a teraflop machine or what have you. But it depends on how you use it, right? So if you wanted to choke this and make it FP64 and make it half a teraflop or whatever, you could do that and it'd be extremely accurate. But for what reason? There's almost no need for that. So there's tensor cores. They're saying they got 32 of them. Not really sure about that. I don't know if Nintendo wants to leave, because these are effectively shader cores that are dedicated to neural processing, right? So for your for your AI upscaling and stuff like that, for your local neural network, so you don't have to reach out to the internet like old DLSS used to for your model updates. You can run them locally on the system and come up with some approximations for really good upscaling. I don't know if you need 32 for that. I don't, for something this small, and you're talking about the same power envelope, maybe up to 45 watts, I'm guessing at this point. Do you really need, when you could have those extra, when you could have half of those tensor cores here as GPU cores? I guess it depends on what your use case would be, but right. I'm not really seeing it for something that's going to be upscaling to 1080p the majority of the time, or upscaling to 1440p or 4K. Unless you're really, really drawing 1080p and upscaling to 4K all the time, I don't really see the need for this. This is probably more for I'm guessing third-party developers that don't want to,
Yeah,
they just don't want to try.
I
So
would
they're like, hey,
imagine.
we got this really low resolution and we want to upscale as high as possible. You're going to use all the cores and all the SIMD for that. But
yeah,
I don't even. Who knows if it's even going to be 8 nanometers? It kind of I guess it looked like it for some of the people that were looking at the leaked pictures or whatever.
Mhm.
But I don't know. You never really know, because all we know is it needs to be 8 nanometer for that CPU to be in there, though, because that's an 8 nanometer part. So bare minimum it's for this to be there. There could be a smaller die shrunken version of the Ampere GPU in there as well. We don't know, or it cannot be Ampere at all. It could be some type of hybrid. So
I can imagine them really talking to those third-party developers and understanding that they're not going to be the same as Nintendo, right? So Nintendo's going to pay attention to how this is built. They're going to ask those questions and they're going to say, okay, how can we be as efficient as possible with little work or little specs as possible? And then you have to go and talk to those third-party developers. And like you said, hey, we're going to do everything the same way we've been doing it. We're not changing it for nobody. So I was like, all right, let me take you into account to ensure that you can bring it over, because then we get the narrative of, oh, the game is just too magnificent to run on my device, opposed to you just being lazy.
That grand vision, baby. That's that grand vision.
And that's weird too, because the whole thing is like you're using these teraflops and whatever to determine whether or not your game is going to go on this platform now, or whether there are going to be a bunch of cross-platform games on the system. And I'm like, the whole benefit of this system anyway is for it not to receive multiplats. It needs to be the lead platform anyway.
Yep.
So for all these third-party games, if they start here, it won't ever be an issue. And then you can always do whatever you need on those other platforms. You just really need all the titty flops, as Mr. T would say. And then you can do whatever you want there. You're like, well, we have all the titty flops on PS5, so we can do all the things. And then Series X has even more, so we can do all the things or whatever. And now we're 4K. So
right,
if that was the case, that's what you would do. But
personally, I need 16K. I mean, personally.
So question though, quick question. With this being with Steam Deck, let me do that. With Steam Deck being a similar build, in the nature of form factor, do we look at developers develop for the Switch 2 and then kind of take that same idea with Steam Deck versions, now that there's a way to, I guess, more or less give an idea of what it is that you should be doing? Because I mean, I've never seen a PC or any PC type device get coded for.
I would love that, but Valve isn't even pitching for that, which is the sad thing, right? I would love for Linux to be a target, right? And we're not, because we keep seeing all these Proton shoehorns, and I get a lot of flack back and forth on Twitter for people talking about how awesome Proton is, and I'm like, compared to what though? And they always tell it. Always the conversation always ends up being compared to a Windows build. No, I want to know what it's like compared to a native Linux build, because and I know that it would be better if it was directly coded straight for Linux versus being in a wrapper.
Yeah.
Like come on, man. Like, it takes time. It doesn't matter how minuscule or how minute, but it does take time to convert something from being a Windows product to being a native Linux build. And that's just a thing. Like, so they're losing what should be a very, very good bespoke market for a system that really should be screaming, and it should be like really doing significantly next generation things in that form factor is what it should be doing. But it's not, because it's stuck being just a spec how can I say this, a configuration in Steam. Unfortunately, it's just basically a switch that you select when you're trying to run your game, unfortunately, instead of it being, hey, built for Steam Deck.
Right. Because I mean,
running's great on Deck. No, built for Steam Deck.
Yeah. And that's where I've run into quite a few issues with my son's Steam Deck, to where, let's say X, Y, and Z game doesn't work. I'll go to the forums and they're like, oh, make sure you download Proton, blah, 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 blah. And then it'll work. I'm like, I shouldn't have to do all that. Like, it's just like, I really shouldn't have to do all that.
And they're like, download the nightly, download the experimental version. How about I just download the image and it works? Like, if Valve said, you know what, we're going to find out how to get these little cartridges made, and they started getting Steam cartridges for some of these games and publishing them. Number one, they make money hand over fist publishing for third parties anyway, because they're like, oh, I want a Steam cartridge. I want a Steam cartridge. They want to publish or whatever. And now you have a physical, because people want to buy physical anyway. Now you have a physical copy of a Steam game that you can play. You just put the cartridge in for Steam Deck 2 or whatever you want to call it. And you get all this performance because it's targeted specifically for Steam Deck, and all the benefits of not having to reach back to cache on an SSD somewhere. It's all on the ROM, so you can always re-reference it without any latency. So
well,
it would definitely be a better handheld than whatever this Switch 2 thing would be. Off the rip it would be, but Valve doesn't want to do that. They want you to be on their store buying PC games. So
Shadow, let me ask you this. Has Valve made Half-Life 3?
Man, the rumors
that should answer all your questions about Valve.
There were big rumors about that happening for Jeff's show. It was like it was supposed to happen.
Like I said, that should answer all your questions in regards to Valve.
And this is what scares me about Valve, because Valve is about to have this Bigfoot pot of like things that are supposed to happen but never happen. So I'm looking at Half-Life Alyx 3 or Half-Life 3, because we got Half-Life Alyx, but Half-Life 3, that Deckard that was supposed to be showcased last year never came to fruition. So I don't even think they're doing another VR headset. But then also too, I think you're gonna start throwing a Steam Deck 2 in that pot too, solely because with them doing Steam OS on different devices now, letting other third parties use Steam OS, I don't foresee them making a new one. It's like, why not just go to Lenovo or go to Asus or anybody to just do it for us? And that way it's championing our OS. And then we know you're going to buy the games here anyway on Steam. So why make another device if we kind of like ushered it in to make it popular, and then we just let everybody else run with it? Because that's kind of how Google was doing it for a minute before we really started getting phones from them. Like you saw Android, but then they didn't start off with the Pixel. They started off with the Nexus. That disappeared after a while, and then the Pixel started showing up. But yeah, and then even with Microsoft don't make PCs. They just have Windows.
Yeah, they just have their OS. That's it.
Yeah. So I don't know, man.
This is so we're running at pretty close to 2 hours here, so we can wrap it up pretty soon if people
I beat you to the punch on that one, TG.
For this one right here?
Yeah.
I mean
that's that question.
Title of the episode, right? So like it's just funny, man, because like why people can't count generations, man. It's just so wild.
Well,
people can't do math.
I have nearly 1,400 Switch games. It's clearly 8th gen.
I'm just really understanding.
Somebody said that to me, actually. Somebody said that to me, that they have 1,400 Switch games. They know that Switch is not 9th gen. I'm like, are you out of your freaking mind?
So in this tweet here, which is hilarious to me, I had this guy here, I think, Good Citizen Daryl replied to it, so I can see it or whatever, right? This guy right here, he already put it out. He said he put out exactly what I needed to see, because it's funny to me, because if this is the case, what are you admitting when you do this, right? So let me pull this up real quick. Sorry, y'all, I got to get better at streaming. But so here, right? I just, I put the 10th generation thing out here. He said technically it's Nintendo's 9th gen console. 10th gen starts in 2028 or whenever PS6 comes out. Who gave Sony exclusive right to start gens anyway? But he said Switch and Wii U are 8th gen. So now we're at the point where people are conceding that Wii U is 8th generation. Remember when that wasn't a thing?
Yep. Remember that.
I remember when people were trying to call Wii U 7th gen.
Yep.
So now we're conceding that Wii U started the 8th generation in 2012. So Nintendo could start gens. Good to know. Good to know.
I just, like I said, I blame the media because we went into this whole graphic horror era, and it was literally like, oh, this is ushering in a new generation. Like
And that's
and that's not what it means. Like this is, which America has a huge problem with, of redefining words and just being totally off base, but
dead wrong.
And be dead wrong.
Dead wrong.
But generation isn't indicative to what the device does. If that was the case, we would not be in 10th gen, because let's be honest, PlayStation and Microsoft are not doing anything astounding that would push the generation forward. If we're talking about anything, Nintendo's the one that's really switching things up. And I'm glad this picture is up here, because if we're talking about switching from generation to generation, and you look at each one of these controllers that you see up here, Nintendo did something different that would change the way you play. Even if it's not that same controller, it has elements of that controller in our current controllers today. Minus the Xbox controller, because they still refuse to do gyro. But
they just now getting Bluetooth together.
Yeah. They want you to. They're still making people use batteries.
Hey, look. Hey, if it lasts longer than my PS5 controller, I'll take batteries all day. But it's like, but I don't know. Like, I don't understand how you think graphics is what pushes it forward, because what metric do you go by?
Exactly. Whose graphics at that point? So what are you saying? Since Nintendo 64 was more capable than the PS1, then PS1 was 4th generation then?
Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, at all.
So what are we doing? It couldn't fully realize 3D the way the N64 did. It had interpolation issues. It had polygonal draw issues.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't have the footprint that the N64 did. So we label those as 4.5?
To be fair, most people that make these asinine statements, they can't defend their own statement.
No.
When you
all you got to do is take their logic and apply it to something else and see if it fits, and it usually doesn't.
Yeah, because you're like, dude, like even if you want to say if you want to say Nintendo ain't, I'm like, bruh, it's Nintendo's 9th gen. It's still their 9th generation.
Like Nintendo released 2 8th generation consoles.
That doesn't make sense. It does not make sense when they're.
But the Atari 5200.
Like, bro, just play your games and be quiet.
They can't do that because they don't have nothing to play.
The Atari 5200 is like
buy Astrobot and play
it. It's like the PS5 Pro.
Yeah, like that sounds like, dude, buy Astrobot and play it. Since y'all want to brag about it, winning Game of the Year, but it only got 1.5 million sales. Buy Astrobot and play it.
Like,
and stop worrying about that.
So in late 2016, as the Wii U was coming to a close, Nintendo made a tweet and said, "Welcome to the next generation of Nintendo, NX." This is NX right here. Right there, all this is NX, the next generation of Nintendo. Right? It now has a successor, so it is starting the 10th generation of consoles.
That's basically what it is. When they decided to go the way they did and went in 2012, it threw the other two off because people were used to them all releasing at the same time. Yep. I mean, 2017. When they did it in 2017, it threw everything off. The one they did March, and everybody else did the holiday. Then PS5 and Xbox Series don't come out till 2020 because they did PS4 and Xbox One. So it threw people's minds off from that, but it really shouldn't have. It shouldn't.
I'm still trying to figure how was the Switch a mid-gen refresh for the Wii U if they don't play the same media?
They don't even play the same games. No. You can't put a disc inside of a Nintendo Switch.
Yeah, I mean, Look, man, I don't play inferior consoles. I only play the best. Okay, so you can't ask me to think about this stuff. I'm just repeating what somebody else said.
Because imagine if you got a PS5 Pro and it didn't use a DualSense controller.
Yeah, that
doesn't make any sense.
This was hilarious to me because I saw this in real time in like February 2017. The Wikipedia editors were having an argument. They were literally arguing over why they thought that Switch was not 9th gen. They were trying their best. They're trying their best the way to wedge it and say it wasn't. Mm-hmm. They're like, well, the PS4 Pro is just now coming out, so we can't. I'm like, okay. They were trying their best to other this system before it was even ready. Because there was a 9th generation topic already there, and so people had put Nintendo Switch in there. So somebody deleted the 9th generation as a Wikipedia topic, completely deleted the entire category, and then had this argument about Switch or whatever, and did not put it there until the PS5 and the Series X came out.
Yep.
Literally left the category deleted until those are there. So it's almost like so they just can't. Nintendo just can't start generations. Like why does it hurt your brain so much?
Because it's not this big 8K, 120 frames per second. Because I don't know when we got there. Like that was, this realism era is killing gaming right now.
Yeah.
It generations really are based on time. Like Scartel just put it here. Like he just said the funny thing, Switch released so early, lasted so long. I said watch this. Yeah. The Switch will compete with PS5 and Series X longer than it did PS4 and Xbox One.
Which is crazy.
I said, mark my words, that's exactly what's going to happen. And sure than shit.
Yep. Because Sony and Microsoft can't leave Nintendo on the doggone board without something for too long. They can't do it.
So how long do you think they're going to hold on now? Because if this successor comes out in June,
well, they've already tried. Remember, because you got the PlayStation Portal.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
You got, and right before this announcement, we had the PS5 Pro because they thought Nintendo was gonna reveal in October, just like they did for the regular Switch.
Right.
So they've already and they're like, well, we got a PlayStation with upscaling now, because if Nintendo brags about the upscaling, they don't have it.
Yeah.
But they have to, but you can't be that stupid to where one is created for it and one seems to have it baked in midway.
They think their customers are, so they don't know what Nintendo's going to say. So they're like, well, we don't want them to ever sound like they have something we don't.
Yeah. So I'm thinking since 2025 now, we'll probably get a reveal of something in 2026. They'll probably both be out 2027.
Yeah, because that would have given them 7 years on the market. Yeah.
So they're gonna rush it. I'm pretty sure
that's why I'm like
until 2028. But
that's why I'm like, people that went and got the PS5 Pro, I'm not hating. If you got the money, go do it.
Do your thing.
I'm saying when you see that PS6 and you see it costs $1,100, don't complain.
Because they're gonna keep pushing that envelope. Because it's one of those things to where they have to look at these PC handhelds and they have to look at how much people are willing to spend. Yeah. And sometimes, that just equates to people just on Twitter talking. Mm-hmm. They're not spending money. They just talking.
I mean, Astrobot.
Astrobot
y'all talking.
That's going forever.
Yeah. Y'all talking. Y'all not buying that game. Y'all talking.
So to the right over there, he responded to me and tried to give me this rudimentary explanation. The generation timing, the Switch released during blah blah blah, and I just told you how it competed. It's already competing with PS5 and Series X longer than PS4 and Xbox One.
Right.
So, and if that's the case, then if the Switch OLED came out right after PS5 and Series X came out, so they're not 9th gen either, because the Switch iteration came out after they launched. So what are you saying? Anytime you use their logic and try to apply it to other things that Nintendo is doing, it doesn't add up. Just they're all based on time, dude. Whenever one launches and another one launches another one, it's the next generation of their thing, and all the next generation of their thing grouped together are that collective generation.
Basically,
the Dreamcast came out a full year before the PlayStation 2 and 2 years before the GameCube and Xbox.
Yep.
It started the 6th generation.
Yep. I mean, it didn't last long after that, but yeah.
but it started the generation.
But it started
it though. It may not have finished it, but it surely started it.
So
yeah, I don't know. I've had people say like, oh well, when all 3 new devices are out, I'm like, that still doesn't make sense because what if I don't drop anything? We just don't go to a new generation.
Yeah.
That's stupid.
Doesn't make any sense at all. Like, let me get this straight. So I'm going to build a whole new piece of hardware, but because somebody else doesn't, I can't call my successor next generation.
That's crazy.
So if Nintendo and Xbox don't release another platform and the PlayStation 6 comes out, it is not a 10th generation console.
It's a refresh.
It's a refresh. Because we're waiting on other people, right? Or what you're trying to say is only Sony can start gens. That's what you're saying. I mean,
that's not true. That's not. No company decides that. No matter what they fans want to believe, no company starts that. Like no company can say, "Oh, I'm the only one that starts the generation." That's not how that works.
Oh, they stupid fans gonna feel that way, but
yeah, that's not how that works.
It's so backwards, man.
Because my thing is this too. Is like if I'm a Sony fan, I'm a Sony diehard, and that's where all my money is. That's my ecosystem. Same thing with Microsoft. I have to start questioning what do they do at this point in time, because if I don't like the idea of the Switch or the Steam Deck or any of that, I don't want them to go that way. It's almost like they've set me up to like one thing, and they may have to switch from it. Because even when we see these reports of like all these games as a service games getting canceled on Sony side, that had to have pushed some games back. Like that wasted people's time. So I'm curious as into, even if I'm excited to see a PS6, in which for me, even though I said I'm going to have one console this generation, I'm still excited to see the new PlayStation come out. I'm still excited to see what Xbox does next. But the question has to be, what do they do?
Yeah. What do they do at this point? Because there's no 16K media. Yeah. No. 8K media is
they slapped 8K on the box, but I'm sorry, has anybody in the chat bought an 8K TV yet?
Fam, I've seen the prices on the TVs. I've only seen 2 people buy it, and they had to give Buddy the one that was off the wall. It's like they didn't have.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, dude, they cost too much. They literally cost too much. Not when you can get a 4K, a 60-inch 4K for $420.
Yeah.
Like, you might as well just get the 4K. You ain't buying, and then on top of that, ain't nothing being shot in 8K.
No. And then because to be honest with you, the appealing TV is those Hisense TVs that are selling in Walmart.
Yeah,
those are the appealing TVs, because you can say to yourself, I want a 4K TV, let's say about 65-inch, and spend maybe about $1,000 and some change, right? Or I can get a 1080p 85-inch TV from Hisense and spend maybe $800. Like,
yep,
that's the reality.
And sometimes it's cheaper than that, depending on when you're going in. Because the Super Bowl is coming up, I promise you're finna see a whole bunch of TVs get a whole bunch of price cuts.
Yep.
And it's so crazy how people bleed through TVs like that. I still got TVs in here that are older than my kids.
Like, bro, anytime March Madness, the Super Bowl and March Madness are the big ones that people go and buy a 70-inch 4K OLED, because Walmart and Target are gonna cut them prices to under $500 for it, and then probably in some, depending on what it is, if it's a Vizio, they'll probably throw in a Vizio soundbar for $500.
Boy,
yep.
I've seen them do it.
Like, literally, you're selling somebody a TV and say, all right, cool, we're going to give you the sound bar, and also it has Google TV built into it.
Already into it. So you ain't got to worry about none of that. And and why are you buying it? Because you about to have a whole bunch of people over to the house for the Super Bowl, or you about to have a whole bunch of people coming to the house every weekend for March Madness, and I need to show people that I'm up to date.
Sigma Sound and Media over here dropping knowledge up in the chat over here. I ain't even got to stand on my soapbox. He over here doing it for me. He laying it down over here. Yeah, that's it. And so far he ain't said nothing wrong. This is pretty much it.
But here's the crazy part about all of this. Like, everything y'all saying is true. Sigma, what you saying is true. But if them games don't show up, none of that matters. Because it's like, is that right now, for me, I should not, if I was a Sony pony, I should not be saying damn thing about Xbox because I should be so occupied with games and so occupied with these realism, whatever. I shouldn't have nothing to say.
But they're not. They all on their phones, bro, instead of playing their games. My podcast was late because I was playing Unicorn Overlord, bro.
Yeah.
Like, that's where I'm at right now. And
it's that simple. That's what I've been saying. Y'all, they keep bragging about Astrobot, but Astrobot sales does not match up with the brags.
It don't match up. And that's why I wish we had like a better source of the sales numbers. Like I said, I know LeBron's new contract every day, but I don't know what the sales numbers are on these consoles. But you know, I guess it all depends on what they choose to put out there. But ultimately, I mean, Astrobot is that game that really not only did it come out at a certain time to where you should be still playing it, but then they added free DLC for you to do these time trials and everything for you to keep playing. So I mean, it's very evident that there are those groups that get these systems and they only pick up the games that get 90 plus on the Metacritic score. And that's why there's nothing for them to play because they don't want to try nothing.
Yeah. Well,
How They Feed You should be another I should go back to that. I only did 2 of those episodes. I need to do another one. But it's people are legit lemmings out here, man. And they swear they're trying to educate other people on the internet. I'm like, all you doing is waiting on somebody to tell you what to do. And you just go right along and do it.
Crazy. I can't play like that. Like I got into this thing as a hobby and to have fun. And then, you know, when social media showed up, it was cool because you had other people to talk to that wasn't around you. Because everybody would be like a secret gamer back in the day. But now, like, you can just converse with anybody. But then with anything, when it gets too big, it starts bleeding in or letting in those people that really don't play. They just want to be a part of the conversation because it's popular.
Exactly.
That's why I missed the Miiverse.
Boy. Hey, well, man, let these rumors tell it. You might get what you looking for.
That's the only thing I've been asking to come back. I'm like, just bring back the Miiverse. Like, get me off of Twitter. Don't listen to the loud minority ever again. Get off Twitter and give us our own space.
Hey, look, chat, I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. If Nintendo gives me a way to communicate on my device, even if it's an app on my cell phone, the only thing you'll see on my Twitter is something in regards to the podcast or something in regards to my music. Because I'm not going back and forth with nobody on Twitter after that. Like,
Miiverse was great for that because, like, when you saw trolls on Miiverse, you could call them out because they didn't play the game.
Yep. And then
you could tell they didn't play.
They would always go into hiding
there if you played the game or not.
And they would always go into hiding. Would always go into hiding. I'm like, bro, what you hiding for? Especially with Xenoblade Chronicles X. But that's a whole other story. That's
there was a lot of that. There was a lot of hating on that game early on too. Yeah. But now we'll go ahead and call it, man. We're at a solid just over 2 hours here. But I appreciate y'all coming through for the ShadowCast. Starting the year off right, I guess. Episode 60. So I'm gonna try to do these weekly. This was supposed to be on a Friday, but other things got caught up in the way. So next Friday we'll try to do this again. I'm not sure about I haven't got the timing nailed down yet, so I'm not sure exactly what's going on with that. Everybody appears to be moving their podcast to Fridays now for some reason. I don't know why. I just picked it because it's easier for me, but everybody else is moving them now too. So I appreciate y'all. Thank y'all for supporting the channel. Y'all know what to do. I'm not going to social intelligence. Everybody else will tell you to subscribe and all this stuff. I'm good. Y'all know what to do.
Right. You know what to do. You like it? Stay around.
you know how it works. So, but nah, I appreciate my panelists coming on here. Action Jack, go tell people where they can find you, man.
Of course, you know, you can find me on the Gaming Grounds channel. You can find me on the Winging It podcast. I mean, I'll be on Sandstorm's Rebirth podcast, you know, more times than not as well. But then also I'll be starting my live on Thursdays. I'm starting in February. So I'll start doing my lives, but it'll be a little bit different from how we all run it here. So, you know, that first episode will kind of be a pilot episode. And then I've kind of like centered it down to, I'm going to do like an interview style. So let's say, for example, I have Jay on, kind of get people caught up on how he got started into gaming, got into this whole thing, and then go into the topics after that. You know what I'm saying? So we'll go into that as well as starting that news channel in February as well. And like I said, you know, having fun with it, you know, not just, okay, I'm just spitting off what you already know, adding some comedy into it as well. So I think it'll be pretty dope. But yeah, you can find me on YouTube, find me on Twitter, and then also on the music scene. You can find me on all your streaming platforms.
Okay, awesome. Jay, go ahead and tell. Well, they already know you anyway, but go ahead.
Wiener Podcast tonight. We got a couple special guests coming through. So 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Chat will be open, as y'all all know. Y'all pretty much have a pretty good idea what we're talking about tonight, right? I mean, y'all
right.
Chat y'all know, right? Okay. So y'all already know what we're gonna be talking about for the most part. I'm gonna throw in a couple of special extra things, but other than that, that's pretty much all I got for you lovely peoples today. There was, if you guys want to check out the first 40 minutes of Tales of Grace's Elf Remastered, it is up on the channel. So that came out this morning. Want to let people see how I play. So if you're one of those people that expect me to talk through my gameplays, I don't really do that a lot, and I'll tell you why. I want people to play the game and see how the game plays and how the soundtrack is and see if you like it or not. So if I'm talking, you can't do that. So I want you to see and hear and see how the game plays, see if you like the soundtrack and all that other good stuff. So that's why I don't commentate on every game I play. So, and I don't play the whole game. I don't stream the whole game. I just don't do that because I found out the hard way that people will watch you play the whole game and then not pick the game up, and then what's the point? Yep. So that's pretty much why I don't do that. But other than that, check us out at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Awesome. I'll speak for our dear departed here. Sandstorm. he had to pop out for a little bit, but he said he'll stay on in solidarity for us. So yeah, y'all catch him on the Sandstorm show. He had a good one last night, so go back and watch the replay. His is on Saturday, so make sure y'all hop on and support. I try to get on there whenever I can and support. So y'all should too. Come through, support the channel, and then go from there. As for me. Channel dead, channel not dead, channel dead, whatever. I'm just that guy, man. I show up whenever I can and try to provide y'all some content, talk about some technology as it applies to video games and how people are really weird sometimes and they break their own thought process because they have bias. So other than that, that's all I got for you guys. And all I got to say is, do you play games to have fun or to impress other people? We out.
See ya.
And you got to press end sometimes, and it just does whatever. I love ending these podcasts this way because it just stops whenever it wants to. So it just, hey man,